Welcome to the Fresh Start podcast with Aaron and Chloe.
Here's some of our favourite moments from the week. Joining us is Asher Morrison. He's a clinical psychologist from the Family Psychology Clinic. And Chloe, we're talking about lying.
I hate other people lying to me.
Hey, at least you're being honest.
No, but do you know what I mean? Lying it's awful. You just want to trust people. And I think as a parent with kids, I want to trust my kids. It is so hard when you catch them out in a lie. Ash, I want to ask about tweens and into teens. You catch one of them out in a lie. As a parent, how are we meant to move forward with that?
Yeah, there's a couple of things to consider. Probably the main thing is to remember that this is a relationship. And so there's certain ways we should approach it at a relational level. So we spoke before about not getting into like detective mode with them. It becomes much harder to know if a teenager is lying than, say, a 5-year-old who's made a mess somewhere. Teenagers are much more adept at lying, like we are. So what's important, I think, is to prioritize trust with your relationship with your kid. If they tell you something and you're still a bit fishy on it, I think it's important to still let them know that, okay, I'm going to trust you. And look, you might think, well, they're going to get away with things. Generally not. It's a principle of life. Generally, every lie at some point gets uncovered. And it's not our job to always uncover all the lies for our kids. I've also found too that if you say to your teenager, okay, they say they weren't up late or they weren't on that computer or whatever it was, until you've got hard evidence to talk to them about it otherwise, just to look at them and say, okay, I'm going to trust you. And look, sometimes what'll happen with that is that sits on them like some sort of like great heavy weight.
You hope.
Sometimes. And they might circle around a bit later. Hey, I forgot to mention something, or, there might have been something here, which is their way of being, look, I need to come clean with something. But other times they won't, and that's okay. We'll just deal with it when it does come to light, rather than putting on the whole, getting into this detective, trying to interrogate. No, I'm going to trust you, buddy.
Yeah.
And when things pop up later, that's when you address it.
Yeah, calm, collected conversation. I think one of the harder things in life, as I'm learning as I get so old, is just that there's no excuse for going crazy. To put it colloquially. Like, especially as parents, we have to stay calm. And it is so hard. Especially if you're like, no, I know the truth. I'm not talking from personal experience at all. No, actually I'm not. My kids are great. This is a bit of a tangent, but say somebody's in that situation and they know their kid is in a pattern of being deceitful. Do you have any tips for parents to just not flip out and make it all worse?
Well, I think it's important to remember that this is an unusual dynamic between you and your kid. Like, think about any other situation. Like, imagine if, Aaron had said that, he'd done something but hadn't and it impacted the show. You would probably have a fairly heated discussion about that, but in every other relationship.
At least a stern look from her.
Not that you'd ever make a mistake.
Sternly worded email.
Passive-aggressive response, yeah. But with your kid, it's different. The demands that are put on us that we then have to, just stay calm under, stay measured under, are unlike pretty much any other relationship you'll have. Something that I've found particularly helpful, and I'm still working on this personally, but something I found helpful for me and also for families that I speak to is to, in that moment, prayerfully remember that parenting is a long game.
Yeah.
And that this might seem at the moment like, oh my goodness, my kid's become a psychopath, or, they're going to head for a life of crime now. Just to take a breath and remember parenting is a long game. This will pass. You'll get through this. And we don't need to freak out like it's the end of the world.
Good advice.
You mentioned a pattern of lying, because I think there's pretty obvious things where you gave an example before about you did a thing, you panic, and you want to kind of cover it up. And that's an instinctive thing that even our best behaved children and the children we call, inverted commas, good, occasionally are going to want to do that because it's about avoiding the consequence and whatnot. If it's actually now just become a pattern all the time, so versus something as big has happened, they're just not telling you the truth about various things. Is that something different? Is that something that there might be another issue to deal with there?
Yeah, there's probably some deeper work that needs to happen there. Anytime we get in the habit of doing something that we know inherently is wrong, there is a dulling there that happens of that sensitivity that, I shouldn't have done that. The more you do something, the more that gets dulled, or you compartmentalize it. So absolutely. I would say also too, if that's the case, there's probably another behavior that's habitual that's a problem as well. If we're having to lie that much, there's probably something else, whether it's, sneaking on to play video games when we're not supposed to, or it's, looking at pornography, or if it's some other sort of risk-taking behavior. There's probably two things there to work on, and it's probably going to need to address both those things in order to help the young person get free of it. Yeah.
Now, Aaron, I have to ask you, do you remember lying to your parents at all?
I never lied to them. Ding! That's the buzzer going off. I actually distinctly remember my first, I don't know if it was the first time I ever said something that wasn't true, but the first time I intentionally said, I'm going to say something that isn't true in order to get away with something. And I can't remember exactly how. I might have been like 4 or 5 or something, and it was as I was going to bed. And yes, listeners, it does have to do with brushing teeth, but I brush my teeth every night. It was all fine. But I remember I'd hopped in bed and Mum just said, and have you brushed your teeth? And I just remember looking and going, my choice now is to say no and get out of bed and do it, or just say the simple word of yes and get on with my night. And I remember I chose the bad option. Not a big deal, but I remember it hitting me as I sat there and went, I can't believe I just did that. And I'd like to say that was the last time, but but you're absolutely right what you're saying about it dulling. It's like, I remember it was like, I've stepped over a barrier here, and
right.
Thankfully I took it in enough to hopefully be a person where I that wasn't a habitual thing I did or anything. But yeah. You remember your first time?
I don't remember my first time, but I certainly remember a few doozies. I remember spilling something on Dad's favourite antique table and putting a tablecloth over it, and even leaning on that tablecloth and having like an overly friendly conversation with him when he got home, so that he wouldn't, wouldn't sort of look under or anything.
Because he's not going to notice a tablecloth on his favourite antique.
No, not at all. Anyway.
Yeah. But I guess looking at these two good men, there's hope for us all.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking about a topic that is so hard to navigate as a parent. I was shocked the first time I found out my kid lied. I was shocked. I was like, oh my goodness, what is happening? You're lying if you're saying you've never experienced it with your kids. We're talking about lying today, Asher.
We are. It's such an affront, isn't it, when your beautiful child lies? Because, I think everyone's got this sense that that's just about the worst thing you can do, to lie, to look someone in the eye and say something's one way when it's not. And when you see your beautiful child doing it, you just, no. Yeah.
Is there an age where lying starts? Because I've got very young children and I feel there's a certain earnestness there. And I'm also, I guess, trying to distinguish between intentional lying versus, maybe there isn't a difference, but is there an age where really this starts to kick in?
It's a good question, because I guess with really little kids, sometimes they'll just say yes or no to you just because they think that's the response that you're after. But generally, as you head into those preschool years, certainly heading into school years, that's when every kid tries lying. It's a sign of, I guess, mental and social development too, to understand that, I could say something other than what it is and that has social implications. That's actually a sign of healthy development. But there's lots of things our kids do that are a sign of healthy development, but doesn't mean it's going to be good for them to keep going with it either, right?
Yeah.
And we all know that lying is toxic for your life. It erodes trust, and trust is the foundation of good relationships.
So what age would you say generally you'd see kids trying out lying?
Yeah, around that preschool to early primary schools, probably when they're first having a go at it.
Right.
And look, if you can get your approach worked out pretty well with them at that age, it's the best time to deal with lying because it's so obvious when they're lying, right?
Hands covered in paint. Like, I didn't touch the paint. Yeah.
That's right. So you don't have to sort of sit there or lie in bed at night going, were they telling me the truth or not? So it's a really lovely age to be working through that with them. But sometimes it can persist a bit longer and it can be cyclical too, particularly when things like shame come in for our kids' behaviour. And a lot of this can happen again in the teenage years. It mightn't be direct lying. It could just be not telling you everything or covering over something because I have a lot of shame or conviction around some of my behaviour.
Yeah, because it's not that straightforward, hey. I try and get to the bottom of why it's happening, but there is always a temptation as a parent, well, for me anyway, to go into detective mode. Like, let's gather the clues and I'm going to outsmart you and go, ha, caught ya, and that's going to solve the issues somehow. You wouldn't recommend that, would you? You're looking at me like that's not a good idea.
Yeah. Look, it's certainly very tempting because I think everyone loves a good whodunit and mystery show. And sometimes you think, yes, I'm going to crack this one. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. It does set up a bit of an interesting dynamic with your kid. First of all, it amplifies a sense of distrust. I'm the detective, you're the criminal. I'm Sherlock, you're Moriarty, and we're trying to, outsmart each other here. But also, at a really behavioural level, why would you tell your kid all the different ways that you found it out? You're just making your job infinitely harder the next time.
An anonymous source.
So, and it's just going to make them better at covering their trails. So, we don't want to teach them to be a better criminal, a better liar here. We want to promote honesty.
We might need to break this into different age categories. I love what you're saying there about like the earlier you can set up and establish these things, it sets things up well. But obviously lying, or at least the temptation to, will never go away at any point in our lives. Let's start with, got a young kid. This is, maybe preschool. So we've got a chance now to really set up some patterns. You catch a kid in a lie. How do you deal with it?
Well, first of all, when they're little, you need to make sure they understand the terms. They understand what it means to be honest and what's required from them when you ask them a question about their behaviour or what they've been up to. That needs to be abundantly clear so that they know what the expectation is. And then if you catch them in a lie, I think it's as simple as giving them a minute to say, look, buddy, you and I both know that there's a bit more to this or that that's not true. So why don't you go have a minute and then come back to me, and I'd really love you to tell me the truth. If you tell me the truth, we can just pack it up together. But if you still don't want to tell me the truth, then there might have to be a bit more to this. So you go have a minute and then we'll circle back around. Now, if you've got a super determined little nugget, they're going to come back and be like, nah, wasn't me. A minute later, even half an hour later, even 5 years later. In which case, you just need to deal with the truth of what you know. And when they're little, the thing's broken. They've got the things all over their hands. So there's just, I guess, accountability for that, regardless of whether they've told you or not. Why that's important is that helps children to know that this isn't really an effective way to get out of something.
Yep.
We still had to deal with it. And somehow, Mum and Dad just knew.
It's an instinctive thing in us. And as you said, it could be driven by shame or it could just be about wanting to get away with the thing or avoid the consequence. Are there things that we as parents can do to minimize that? So not just about catching them, but even to create spaces where those ideas are not going to drive that idea. Obviously, we don't want to go, you're never going to get in trouble for anything or whatever, but are there things we can do that might make those things worse even that we could avoid?
100%. I mean, if I think about times where I kept things from my parents, it's because I was scared of their reactions. So I think if we can watch our reactions, it doesn't mean don't have accountability and consequences. A reaction's different to that. A reaction is when we maybe become overly emotional or yelling or use phrases like, how could you do that to me? And when we give, I guess, consequences that are probably excessive, and done out of emotion. So our reaction's really important, staying calm. And sometimes it means taking a moment to step outside, do what you need to do. Because I think a lot of the time it's our reaction which makes it difficult for kids to maybe come clean.
Well, that's our show. Thanks for joining us this week.
You can check out more of the fun on socials. Look for 99.7 on Facebook or Rima Newcastle on Instagram. Check out more of Rima's podcasts at rimafm.com.au.